The Chinese Communist Party-owned People's Liberation Army is enthusiastically making a suicidal move, albeit out of sheer desperation, in a bid to perhaps save face in the Himalayas, where it has gotten embroiled with the battle-hardened Indian forces. The PLA is now desperately on the lookout for Tibetans to serve China as soldiers. Essentially, the CCP is working out a mechanism where the Tibetans help the Chinese state in colonizing Tibet, which is already a victim of illegal Chinese occupation. This comes after it was recently reported that on an average, at least one PLA soldier was dying daily due to the extremely cold climatic conditions prevalent in eastern Ladakh. With temperatures going down to minus 40 degrees Celsius in the region, the PLA is finding it increasingly difficult to keep its troops barely alive. Despite rotating its troops from the frontline areas on a daily basis, things are simply not working out for this militia, which China parades around as a professional army. According to Times Now, having failed all options, the PLA is now looking to induct Tibetans to serve in the PLA. Of course, this is a long list of qualifications which Tibetans must need to fulfill in order to make it to the ranks of the coveted armed force of China, which fought its last battle in 1979 against Vietnam and lost miserably. The Tibetans applying for the PLA have to be young men whose parents or at least relatives have been part of the Chinese Communist Party. They must not have links with the Dalai Lama, who has been living in India for nearly 60 years and is hated by the Chinese Communist Party. Further, they should not have links to overseas organizations, and they must be vociferously pro-China. The Chinese leadership is short-sighted, which is why they are not being able to see through their desperate move and the repercussions it might have. With the induction of Tibetan soldiers into the PLA, China is essentially laying a wreath on its own grave. As and when Tibetan soldiers gain a considerable foothold within the PLA, China will simply be kicked out of occupied Tibet. If there are any people who hate the Chinese Communist Party from their very core, it is the Tibetans. While Tibetans joining the PLA in large numbers is a near impossibility, those getting into the sham of an armed force will spell the death knell for the Chinese occupation of their territory. The Han Chinese-dominated PLA is an egotistical yet cowardly force. TFI has been at the forefront of reporting how the PLA is an army of little emperors with no real combative skill or knowledge. Close to 70% of the Chinese military force is comprised of single children with no siblings. As such, they have been brought up as pampered, quote-unquote, little emperors by parents and their grandparents. In what aggravates the CCP's woes, they have ended up deploying such wimps to the front lines to face a battle-hardened Indian army. Needless to say, without proper acclimatization and winter clothing, Chinese soldiers freeze to death at heights ranging from 15,000 to 18,000 feet above. The Tibetans are being roped in by the Chinese for this precise reason. Unlike soldiers from the mainland, Tibetans are highlanders and are well acclimatized with the weather conditions and heights of their land, which is why China is hoping to deploy them against India. What the CCP and the PLA fail to understand, however, is the fact that India has already deployed mighty Tibetan warriors from its highly covered Special Frontier Force in eastern Ladakh. The Special Frontier Force has already taken part in major operations, including the ones launched by India to gain control of strategic heights in the Pangong Tso region while catching China by surprise. As such, for the CCP to think that the Tibetan people will serve shoulder to shoulder along with other Chinese supremacists to only further the Chinese occupation over their land is a no-brainer. Above that, the Indian Army has some of the greatest mountain troops in the world, which are part of a professional army which lays great emphasis on the years-long process of acclimatization in the high altitudes of the Himalayas. China knows it stands no chance against them, and its desperation is evident.